Hello, hello, hello. Here we are with another world building session? No, a system building session. More specifically, we're going to be comparing different kinds of TTRPGs, get a little familiar with all the different systems out there in the world. How are we doing, boys? It's a lovely Tuesday.
It is lovely, actually.
It is.
It is. The heat broke. We're ready to do some hard thinking.
Mm-hmm. Had all the windows open today.
Me too.
I'm ready to have tea again, man.
Oh,
I'm ready
dude.
for that tea weather. Yeah.
The day that the heat broke and it rained, I went to Costco and they served
Yesterday?
hot green tea.
Yo!
I'm just like, yeah, I'm like, this is perfect.
Little cup and the little cup.
Get the little cup. I'm just like, I have to do it at home.
Incredible.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's feeling good. It's feeling good. I think that heat really got to us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can say that again.
Had a visceral reaction when it was just yesterday when it actually broke. Like, oh my god, I don't feel the humidity. That weight was no longer there. It was literally.
I was at the fake beach in Soulport. I'm just laying out, and then it starts to rain and get cold, and I'm like, this feels so good. I'm not even gonna move. Just let it rain.
Really started to pour, and
Yeah, and then I had to move. But for a few minutes, I was like, oh, this feels amazing.
Few minutes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Here we
Okay.
are.
Moving on.
Yeah, let's get.
Sorry.
I
I
from that.
got distracted by OBS.
Segue,
Yeah.
segue.
Have you guys ever ridden on a Segway before?
No.
Have
Yeah, I'm like, have
No.
I? I think I've like touched one.
No, wait.
You-
I feel like
Scooter, and that's it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I have, but
Europe trip maybe.
I think I've definitely put my feet on a hoverboard. Did I go anywhere though? I don't know.
Oh no, those are I can't even ride a regular skateboard. Terrible balance.
I
But
don't
can you
like
ride a bike?
Yes.
Yeah.
When did you learn how to ride a bike?
As a
As a kid,
child.
As a kid?
Yeah.
You were a kid
On
a
bike? On a
Well,
bike?
look at
well,
that.
Did you
well,
have friends? Did they have bikes? Then it's kids on bikes.
multiple children on
And
bikes.
that's a segue.
a little
CJ's
force
like,
patrol.
God.
Bike.
Yeah,
Everyone
let's
at
take a
home
look.
knows we're sharing a screen internally that says kids on bikes, and none of you can see it.
Oh, it's
There
not a.
Now they can see it. Now they can see it. Right?
Now they can.
Now they can see it. It's all part of the production. Yeah.
Very cool.
Here we are with kids on bikes. We don't have to go through kids on bikes right away. I think let's ease into it. Maybe talk about what we're hoping to achieve here.
Yeah, the goal for today is to bring in like show and tell mechanics from different systems and then just talk about them together. And I think that we're basically going to be putting some in the that's interesting, we like it pile, and then we're going to be putting some in the that's less interesting, maybe we don't like this as much pile. I don't want to say that they're good or bad necessarily. I think that it's more, is it right?
Not a fit
For
for what we
our-
want, what we envision.
Yeah, exactly. For our vision, is it right for that? Which I think is a noble endeavor, and it's going to require a lot of conversation. So,
Absolutely.
where do you guys want to start with this?
Well, I was thinking that we can just start from a topic that is present in all of these systems, which would be attributes, and then we can sort of make our way down the figurative list of things that we typically see in TTRPGs. Maybe
Do
we can
we-
delve into some more unique mechanics later and stuff like that.
Do we want to like, okay, we're talking about attributes, and then everybody kind of jumps in with the conversation, and we all flow together with like talking about the different RPGs, and then when we move to the next one, we do it again?
Yeah, I think so. Unless somebody really wants to present something very specific. I think just having a conversation about it. Yeah.
You have a PowerPoint?
No.
Oh, like send me that.
No.
I'll
Damn,
put
get
it
up
up
on the
right
screen.
now.
I don't have that time. Nor PowerPoint, to be honest.
Google Slides, baby.
Oh,
I am making one for Sistema Agnostica. A little PowerPoint? Presentation.
you
Yeah.
are. Okay.
Just because my thoughts get jumbled, it's easier to have like structure.
Is that in the drive? Can we all take a
No.
peek? Oh.
Private.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna have other notes on ClickUp. Speaking of which, where do we want the notes from today to be, and who's taking notes?
Me
We
and
have-
Peter.
Yeah.
So
So we have a
far.
little document in ClickUp that we can all hop in if you want.
I just want to make sure I have it open and that I'm also taking notes and stuff.
Yeah. ClickUp's a little heavy, I find. So if Google works better, just paste your own notes in the Discord chat later.
ClickUp is so easy to just have open and put stuff in, right? So that's the idea. Now I need to figure out how to sign in. I'm in a weird browser. Let's get just open. Writing a book's hard work. Anybody think about that?
Mm-hmm.
Nah. Just paste a ghostwriter to do it. Easy.
Oh, is that how you're
Are
doing
we
it?
all our own ghostwriters?
Yeah. Just like goes in a circle.
I have an idea for a book. Here, let me just hire a ghostwriter to write it for me. That's incredible. Which list is this note in, Peter?
So it's under I don't have the
Streaming.
whole thing open. Thank you, Siege.
Event planning. System building.
Special events.
Okay, notes
There,
from
I
the
see your
screen.
cursor.
Beautiful.
Oh, Brent's notes. Thanks.
All right. So we're in here. Yeah, just take notes whenever you can, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. So attributes. That's where we're starting.
Let's do it.
Okay.
What is the very definition of an attribute in
Oxford Dictionary
from
says
the perspective of TTRPGs specifically? I think there's probably other words that replace attribute, but I think that that's a very common one. Dungeons and Dragons, and other systems utilize it also.
yeah, but essentially it's what makes up the character. What gives what do the characters rely on to perform their skills?
Yeah, quantifying like the most
Attributes?
fundamental aspects of a person. You know, what else? How else can we describe that?
Here, hold on, I'm getting AI to do some heavy thinking.
Speaking of ghostwriter,
Yeah, speaking of the ghost machine is about to write something for us.
But it breaks down the basic like fundamentals of who like TTRPGs like assign a character or a hero to be, and it assigns them like 6 adjectives that kind of build their repertoire of like this is how they do things. This is what they use to do things.
yeah, I think we're all in agreement
This
there.
gave me some synonyms. So attributes, often called abilities, stats, or characteristics. So we're already starting very broad. And then I like this line, which is define a character's inherent strengths and weaknesses. These attributes provide a numerical basis for resolving actions and determining the outcomes of various in-game scenarios. They typically represent a character's physical, mental, and sometimes social capabilities. And then it actually lists the 6 from D&D 5th edition as its example, which is pretty interesting. And then it says some games might have different or additional attributes, and it lists perception, luck, and willpower,
Okay.
which I think is very odd.
And that's
Yeah,
it.
there's a okay.
Willpower though, I do like.
Yeah.
Because will used to be a defense in 4th edition and 3rd.
Yeah.
And I did like that. Like it's like kind of like the combination of all your like mental fortitudes described into one.
So, but I think the important thing to take from this list is that attributes or attribute points, or however we want to call it, abilities, stats, characteristics, come in like a variety of forms. They determine inherent strengths and weaknesses, and they provide a numerical basis for resolving actions and outcomes. Like, I think that's like, those are the three things that like attributes are inherent strengths and weaknesses that determine outcomes. If I was going to like succinctly sum it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. So, with that in mind, how do the systems that we've looked into handle these attributes or these traits or these characteristics, stats, etc.?
Right off the bat, mine just does strength, dex, con, whiz, in charisma.
Okay,
The one that we're all
mains,
familiar with.
right?
Yeah.
The tried
the
and
main
true.
statistics.
Okay. Well, jumping off of that, the system I looked into, DC20, is very heavily modeled after Dungeons and Dragons. So it follows a similar list of attributes, but it narrows them down into 4 instead of 6. And so instead of strength and dex, it's might and agility. And then there's intelligence, which encompasses both wisdom and int. And then there's charisma. So there's just 4. No constitution. HP is handled differently. So it's about the same, but just simplified.
What was the third one?
Might,
agility,
intelligence, and charisma.
Intelligence. Interesting to combine the two. That makes sense. That's very interesting. Huh. What would you say that like might or no, strength is to dex as intelligence is to wisdom, in the way that like a body can be strong or dexterous and like handle the same situation with 2 different kind of routes. And then the mind can be like super intelligent and go that right, or super wise and go the other route.
So like where like it's basically just like physicality in 2 aspects and like mental in 2 aspects, like
Yeah.
2 different versions of like splitting it up into 2 different things.
Like giving you a physical problem.
Yeah.
No, keep going.
Because I think like charisma is a bit mental but also social, whereas constitution is basically all physical as well.
So if we're gonna go like off of the 5th edition stats, because I think they are well balanced at the end of the day, those 6, right? You have might, agility, and con, which are physical stats like your body, and then you have intelligence, charisma, wisdom, which are more mental stats, right? So it's like very clearly there are 3 in each category. And then in the physical category, you need constitution whether you are strong or dexterous. Basically, it's like it's a benefit to either of those things. But constitution on its own is less useful. And then in the mind category, they have a very similar setup where I find that basically you can be kind of intelligent or charismatic, as those are like it's the basic kind of like choice between which of those skill sets that you want to get, and those determine most of the skills in D&D, right? But then you always kind of need wisdom to be paired with that, because it helps you be more aware of the world, like be more world wary. So they have a very similar setup, those 2 little triangles, right? Which gives it a nice balance, and then you can like really fuck with that balance, right? And then you can be like a wisdom constitution character, and then you get, you know, something fun like a druid.
Yeah, good point. So my agility.
Well,
I mean, I kind of like it. You miss out on wisdom. I think, more than you do on Constitution. Like you said, like on itself, the stat is kind of dull compared to the others. So that being missed from the 6 being to 4, I don't mind. I do like miss the presence of wisdom versus intelligence, like that whole conversation of being wise or being knowledgeable. But in terms of a system, I'm not convinced that it's a bad choice, but I am curious of how they handle like the kind of snowball from there of what else is cut out and combined.
Yeah,
Peter,
I
what's
think
the name of your system? Sorry.
DC20. It's fairly new. It's still in beta. It's made by a YouTuber called Dungeon Coach. And so for like the longest time, I maybe saw some recommended videos from them, but I hadn't really ever checked out their stuff. I think they used to do a lot of D&D 5e homebrew stuff, and I think at some point they just decided, let's just, there's so much homebrew at a certain point, and might as well make a new system.
Yeah.
So it's just from the ground up, taking a look at the things that work in 5th edition, and then, a more modern spin on some of those mechanics. And I agree with the whole thing about the wisdom, by the way. I like the 6. I think having the 3 physical, the 3 mental is really nice. And just, groups of 3 is also really nice. But I think the 2, breaking it into 2 sets, or charisma, intelligence, might, and agility, you do miss out, especially on perception. But I've only flipped through the rule book so much in the last week, but there's a section where perception is kind of its own thing because it's considered like very powerful as a tool, and it's one of the skills that people use the most in D&D. So if you want to be good at perception, I think there's like other avenues within the rules to make yourself good at specifically that.
Yeah, I hear that too. For me, I've always disliked a lot of the separation of attributes. So they do this nicely. Like there's like 2 types. There's like 2 ways to be strong and 2 ways to be mental, or 2 ways to use your body, 2 ways to use your mind. I think that's maybe a better way to describe it. But
yeah.
Like, okay, I'm going to talk about anime a lot today, probably.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it.
For me. But basically, like, it's a big thing in anime of like, and JRPGs in general, and like that kind of like Japanese flavor of culture of like superhero, where like being fast kind of is being strong. Like it's the meta. It's always the Japanese dream is like to be the fastest guy alive and to trump everyone else using your kind of speed in a way. Which fits nicely with their history and like the katana, but sidestepping a lot of that. For me, I've always thought that if you were very strong, wouldn't you move faster? Wouldn't your muscles propel you faster? So I've never truly understood the slow giant, like, I'm so strong and I'm a blundering, like, no, like, it would be Attack on Titan style, right? Wouldn't it? You would be like this big strong giant, but you would move like incredibly fast compared to a normal person.
But
I see what you're saying.
There's also that difference in, I mean, again, if it's getting a bit too sciencey, it makes sense, but it's like the difference between like having that strength, but also being able to move your limbs at that speed as well. Like having heavier limbs doesn't necessarily like having more muscle doesn't necessarily mean that you can move it quicker. Because it's not the muscles that are moving the arm. It is like the synapses like being fired and everything like that. Like the electricity in your body kind of.
That's the I in a literal sense, having bigger muscles does make you move faster, but I see what you mean of like how fast you react or how able you are mentally in some instances like will determine. But then I think you're starting to make an argument for agility being a mental skill, which is not. I don't think any of us would want to go that route.
Mental, and more than the fact that like the body needs to be conditioned for it, and so like it's a different conditioning than strength.
So we get into what I think dexterity and agility have always been meant to be, which is technique. I think that it really it defines like lock picking and stealth and things like that, because it's not about being fast. It's about how you place that foot. It's about how you move.
Skill,
Well,
almost.
Yeah.
To bring it back to the anime real quick, there's a particular moment in the Cell Saga of Dragon Ball Z where
Here we go.
Trunks
Here we go.
is like powering up like crazy, and so he's getting all this muscle mass, and he becomes so strong, and it's useless because it slows him down. He's not nimble anymore, which I think is like a really big part of like agility and dexterity, is like how nimble you are, which is kind of a reaction thing. It's a weird term, but he can't fight because he tries to attack and it's super strong, but it never lands, so it's it's useless. Now that's anime, right? The logic still stands that if you have a ton of muscles, yeah, you'd be able to propel yourself super hard. And if I can go a step further, is that in D&D they do address that a little bit. Athletics is tied to strength. It's not tied to dex.
Yeah.
But I agree, there's a little bleed over between those physical stats.
Yeah. But in D&D, I find players are often mad when I want to climb a thing, and that's about dexterity, isn't it?
No, yeah.
They're like, no, it's a strength skill, roll athletics, and they're like,
Yeah.
Although now that I climb and I boulder, it is about strength. And there is technique in there for sure, but it's more about strength half the time, more than half the time. So,
and then there are systems that kind of bunch things together, like, for example, the kids on bikes that you have on stream is things like they have brains, which is just all of the mental, like wisdom and intelligence all mixed into one. There's brawn, which is just how tough the character is. Like, it's very much kind of broken down into these very large categories, and everything's kind of just pushed into one.
Yeah, brains,
or not
brawn,
one, but like just into
height,
large
flight.
things and not split.
Charm, grit. Oh, so they keep the 6, but some of them are bunched, some of them are split.
Yeah,
And
there's
then
so
some of them are
different.
new.
Peter, you muted.
What I was saying is that they essentially reflavored the 6 attributes to be more in line with, I don't know, how kids would use those stats, as opposed to like strength and dex. It's not very, I don't know, fit for the playground, I guess. Here it's good. Well, grit too is actually kind of not really. Never mind. Brains works. Flight works. Fight. Oh, fight and flight. I get it.
That just hit.
Okay. I take back everything I was saying. It was too preemptive. I didn't even start reading before I was talking.
Yeah, this system is very, like, I find this overall more charming than the D&D ones. Not that I'm voting particularly in this direction, but I do like the narrative flavor that each of these has, as opposed to your normal, I think what we're more used to in terms of like what we would call an attribute, right? Like this is more like you move away from attribute into characteristic, where it's like, is it a smart brain thing, or is it a muscle thing? Is it like a go fast and move thing? Is it like a battle thing? Is it a social thing, or is it a just bear it, like just endure thing? And so that you can comfortably fit stuff into these scenarios, and I think like you can make arguments to fit stuff into these scenarios. Where like I want to run faster than the ogre, and you're like, okay, roll flight, and then they're like, well, I'm really strong and I want to sprint, like just do a burst of speed. Can I use brawn? And that could be like you start describing your character, their muscles are bursting, and then maybe you run less time, or less far, and so it gives you a different option. But like there's a lot of like fun, I think, narrative direction that this can give.
Yeah, it just depends on how, I guess, figured, like literally you take these stats, just seeing how like it says literally this stat determines how fast a character is, and this stat determines how much brute strength the character has. Kind of like it's almost kind of fitting speed and strength separately into these two categories.
Mhm.
So like it's kind of like then up to the DM. Okay, well, do I feel like Brawn will be able to factor into speed? Okay, sure, roll. Or sorry, this is how like the system has dictated it to be.
Well, so now we get into while this is more charming, mechanically speaking, it is less
Cheers.
it's less sure of itself. Or did we get a
Thank you. Oh, from the sheriff himself.
Sheriff Daddy.
I do like the flavor though behind each of these attributes or stats, and how there's a little bit of, I don't know, yeah, they kind of meld some of the 6 attributes talking about D&D into each of them. You know, like fight and flight both have a bit of charisma in there, so it's interesting. It's like really dependent on the scenario, and I don't know, it kind of, like Brent mentioned, it guides you a little bit in how to use them.
Yeah.
But numerically, statistically, like I think kids on bikes, like, and this is I think where we start have to getting into like the grit of each of these a little bit. Where like kids on bikes uses 2d6, right?
Nope. So
It doesn't.
Kids
right,
on Bikes has a it uses all the dice,
like dice pools.
but you basically have to split the dice into each category. So like it's okay, I'm really good at I want my character to be very charming. So he's gonna have a d20 that he can roll in charm. But he's not that tough, so he's gonna have a d4 that he can roll for grit rolls. And he's somewhat smart, so I'm gonna give him a d8 for brains. But he's not too. So like you split each dice into the 6 categories, and then that basically tells you how good your character is at those things, because you'll be able to hit the higher numbers, the higher DCs in that category more likely than when you have the smaller dice. So it's easier to hit a 10 DC with a d20 than it is with a d4.
Yeah. I do like instead of giving like a static bonus to a stat, that's like every time you use this thing, you always will get this bonus, because as we all know, even when we're really good at stuff, sometimes we suck. You know, sometimes we have off days, or sometimes just things don't go well. So I like that, like, yeah, you're really strong. You have a d20, so your ceiling is higher, but you can still fail just the same as if you had a d4 or d6.
That's it. Like, the chance to do bad is still there, but you're more likely to be able to meet whatever the requirement is.
I actually sit on the other side of this conversation, where how many times have we read a fantasy book, like a novel, like with Dritz Do'Urden or something, and they're like carving up some goblins that, you know, came out of the bush, and they dispatch them real easy, which still happens in D&D, but you don't see Dritz like rolling a nat 1 and like just whiffing on like a shitty goblin.
He does, though. There's been times where he like turned his ankle and because he slipped on a rock, and he wasn't able to like get that killing blow or something, because like normally his like super graceful self somehow still managed to slip on a rock. It's true that it's not very often, so it's not like statistically probable that he is rolling d20s or whatever, so he's not rolling a nat 1 because it's not like 1/5 of the time, but there is still those times where the hero doesn't always win. It's just potentially not as often as in other books.
Yeah, I guess you are right about that. And he doesn't often. He always plays to his strengths, I think, in those books too.
He is the speedy fighter and not the brawny fighter. So he goes with that in mind, and those are always his tactics. Like, he always goes with that as a strategy.
He's the min-maxer.
He's a min-maxer for
He
sure.
plays to his strengths, as Brent said.
I don't know if he's a min-maxer though. He's playing a Beastmaster Ranger. It's kind of like a really shitty class.
Yeah. Dual wielding Beastmaster.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, on top of it.
But he's got some incredibly high decks. I'm pretty sure in one of the books they've actually like made character sheets for the different like characters.
Oh, that's cool.
That's cool.
I need to like look it up, but I'm pretty sure it's happened. It's been done.
And if not officially, I'm sure there are plenty of people who have tried to recreate those characters.
Oh, yeah.
So, how do we feel about these stats versus like the 5th edition stats?
I mean, I don't hate them.
I think Peter accidentally fell into my opinion when you didn't read Kids on Bikes, but you had the opinion of like it fits
Mhm.
the system of like being kids. I am kind of that opinion. Have the attributes fit the style of the setting. So if it's something lighthearted, you don't have to use strength, dex, charisma, intelligence, wisdom. You can just use luck and joy, like, you know, whatever it's fitting to the system, it should do like justice to that idea that fuels your system. So I'm down for anything in terms of our system eventually, like whatever fits, I'm good for. I don't feel the need to have those exact 6 at all.
I like the fact that it is always possible to hit a DC in Kids on Bikes. It might not be likely, but it's not like, for example, like in 5e, if the DC is a 25, but you only have a +1 in your modifier, you're never going to get that unless your DM is okay with natural 20s just automatically succeeding. The max you can get is a 21, and that's it. You will never hit that 25. But Kids on Bikes, they have a mechanic called exploding dice, where when you roll the dice you've attributed to that specific characteristic, so let's say you rolled a d6 for fight, you roll a 6 on the d6, the dice then explodes and you can roll it again, and you add the result of both dice, and that becomes your total roll, and the dice can technically still continue exploding until you meet and like go above that DC. So like, let's say the DC is a 13, you explode twice, you're at 12. If you explode a third time, you can't roll again because you've already beaten that DC of 13. You've gotten to an 18 with that third 6. So you've gone past the 13, you can't go past that again. So that's where the exploding stops. So even if it's not likely to potentially roll 3 6s in a row, you still have that possibility. And so like the feeling of that actually happening, I'm sure is like something that can really get you going, something that can really hype you up in a game, because you're like, shit, okay, I did it again. Oh my god, it's gonna, and then you roll it and it happens and you're like, yes, like you're pumped that it's actually happened. Whereas in like 5e and you're like, hey, the DC is gonna be a 25, and you're like, oh, okay, I cannot physically hit that. I'm not even gonna try.
Yeah.
So like I do like that aspect of it, but I do see that the idea of actually having like just that one dice for the roll might be a bit hard. So okay, like I have a D4 for this. Do I even want to try? I guess it's likely, but I don't know how many people might still want to try something with a D4 in their category.
That's a fair point. Rolling a
I
d20 for
love-
everything means you can always potentially roll a 20 on anything. So you don't feel that like, do I even want to roll this little fucking d4? Like,
Yeah.
even if I roll a 4, it's only 4. You don't get that feeling. It's like I could
Yeah, but
always
I mean,
roll.
it does
that
explode, so you can roll again and get like an 8.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, hey, like, what are my chances of getting that? Like, so like it's
Exactly.
a different mindset of like some people might think I'm gonna do it. I can like it's possible, and others are like, how likely is it that I'm actually going to be able to roll 3 4s? So it depends on how you kind of face the game.
I love exploding dice. I think it's such a fun mechanic.
I do enjoy it too.
I think that there's an argument to be made for spacing out the nat 20 and being like, oh, when it finally happens, it feels so good. I argue that more hits of that dopamine are probably fine. If you explode the dice, it feels maybe less impactful, but it still feels really good. And it can happen more often and by everyone at the table, and everyone's invested in everybody when they roll, because if it explodes, everybody's kind of like looking forward to it. Whereas with the D20, sometimes you crit, sometimes you don't. And like sometimes we don't crit a whole session, and then sometimes in the session you crit 7-8 times.
Yeah.
I guess it's like that probability that we always talk about of like, would you rather have that chance of like rolling more consistently versus
Don't even bring probability for D20s, and critting is also affected not just by the 20 sides of the die. It's people's physical dice, right? Like,
yeah, true.
sometimes people, I'm looking at you, Bernie, have dice that roll hot. They roll hot a lot. And we tend, as players, to keep those dice around. I think I have a dice like that. My favorite die is my metal die. And it'll either roll very low or very high. And I kind of love that.
Yeah.
It's true. They are cast with resin or metal or what have you, and then yes, they are supposed to be like balanced, but that balance might not always be perfect, and so they might be weighted towards a specific side or angle of a roll.
That issue does become less prevalent with smaller dice. Like a D4 where it's 25% chance each, and you toss it in the air. Like it's a triangle, when it hits the mat, it's just going to clunk onto a side, and it doesn't really matter. And so the more circular you get with a die, the more chances it has to roll towards the state that it's,
More comfortable.
most likely that it is to rest in, wherever the weight is.
I never even thought of that.
Yeah,
that's so true.
So like even with D6s, like weighted D6s have been around for a really long time, right? For like cheaters at games and playing poker or whatever it is. And weighted D6s do not always roll what they are weighted to roll. Contrary to Pat, what was it, the Road to El Dorado, where he is hitting the table and the dice are like always rolling sevens or whatever. It doesn't work like that. And basically, like I have a pair of legit like poker cheating die. One of the die has 5 on every side, and on the other die it has either 2 or 6, I believe. So it's like 3 2s and 3 6s, and then basically when you roll them, you have 2 sets, and so you roll normal dice, then you switch them out for the false set, and then you either get 7 or 11. And so that's the kind of trick behind weighted D6s, is basically usually it's the faces are changed, or they're weighted in such a way as that they more often fall on your numbers, but there's no way to guarantee it because they're squares, which is also why it's probably one of the oldest dice. And you forget.
What if your D6 have little like I don't know what it's called. Like instead of being flat, they have like a little edge, and then another little edge on the other edge. You seen those dice? They're kind of like flattened out.
But then if anyone picked up your die, they would immediately see, or they like it would be visible, and then you would get found out, right?
I'm taking notes
here. Don't get found out.
Don't get.
So anyway, all this to say, I'm a big fan of smaller dice. I'm a big fan of exploding stuff. Part of me though still is like, I want, if you are a character in a game and you're supposed to be skilled at a thing, I like it when people succeed more often than not at the thing that they're like skilled at.
That they're supposed to, yeah.
Right? Like just, it happens, but you had to remind me that it happens because it happens so little.
Yes, yeah.
And I think like even the 5% chance on the D20 is like too high sometimes in that regard. Of like a nat 1.
Yeah.
Savage Worlds has an interesting fix for this, which is there's something called a hero dice that you roll alongside your regular dice. And so, like Kids on Bike, you have dice for stats, but with every stat, you also roll a d6, and you just take the higher of the two. So basically, you always have a d6 in all of your stats because you're a hero, because you're the main character of the story, and that's your main character die.
Yeah. You're theoretically better than average.
Yeah, and then there's other rules in here. I haven't read this thing cover to cover, but there are rules in here for, like, say your vigor or something, or like say you have a shield that gives you 3d6 on like a defense roll. You can trade 2d6 up for a d8, and then you can roll a d8 and a d6. And then you can also do the opposite, where if you have something that gives you a d20, you can trade it down and then roll 2d12. So you can like mess with your probabilities, which I think is truer to what a hero would be able to do, right? And sometimes it's like you try a different technique or something in the heat of battle to try and get the edge, and then if you fail at that point, it's like, you know, your new thing that you were doing, you messed up. And then there's the other mechanic, which is if you fail by 5 or more, it's a worse failure, and if you succeed by 5 or more, it's a better success. So if you just fail, it's a normal failure, the thing doesn't happen, like you just don't defend or you just don't climb the wall. If it's a worse failure, that's where you sprain your ankle, right? And then the same thing, you succeed, yeah, you do your damage, you super succeed, you know, you cut off a finger. So I like the tiered approach, and I think that's one of the things I really liked about the 2d6 systems powered by the Apocalypse for Avatar and Dungeon World, which was the fail, mixed success, but this gives you a little bit more nuance again. So now there's fail, partial fail, success, and then great success.
Great success. Do you like, do you prefer that, or you kind of like both?
Which do I prefer? When there's only 3 or when there's 4?
Yeah, when there's like, you just succeed, fail, or, well, even just 2. You know, succeed or fail.
I mean, D&D doesn't even have just 2, right? There's critical fail, and then there's fail, success, or critical success.
Yeah, true.
If you play with those things. So.
Yeah.
I'm fine with D&D though. It often does feel like it's just success and fail.
It does feel like that. And the reason that it feels like that, in my opinion, is because the chances of the criticals are very, very low. So when you raise those chances a little bit, like with exploding die, like adding hero die, like having, you know, different types of dice that are able to achieve these different things, then I think it becomes more like every roll is closer. Like every roll is like, shit, am I going to make it right now? Am I going to get the critical fail or the critical success? Like you're always kind of on the edge of your seat in that regard. and it's always possible, like Simon was saying, like if you explode that dice, you're like, oh my god, now I can do the other thing, and like what's that going to do for the story? And so I think it brings back what you lose from having criticals that are spread over greater periods of time and having those like big spikes of adrenaline. I think you get back in being always on the edge of your seat and tense, and then like basically being like, oh my god, everybody's role can have a crazy effect.
I would even take that a step further and saying, because D&D doesn't have any rules for critical failures being anything more than a automatic failure, kind of robs it of those lows to then experience those highs as well.
Yeah.
Like when you get that 5 below the DC, you're like, oh fuck, what happens now? Like it sucks, but you're like anticipating like, oh shit, what did I just do to the story? Instead of it doesn't hit. Next. You know?
I would accept that argument. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. I think Powered by the Apocalypse does it really well, where it's like you're kind of failing upwards a little bit in terms of like what's happening in the game and what's fun. Like there's emergent gameplay in the failure, whereas in Dungeons and Dragons, it's all completely up to the DM. You know, the player doesn't even know necessarily what their failure is going to mean. But in other systems, it almost sometimes they clearly define that.
That's another aspect of a system we could eventually get to, of like as written, this is what can/will happen on a roll versus behind the screen roll, and I'll tell you what happens. You know, I feel like there is a kind of emergence, even just in our group, from where we started to where we are now, of like kind of liking sometimes having it in front of you of like, you need to hit a 12 on this DC or this will happen. It's like, okay, I know I have to hit a 12. It doesn't like ruin the excitement as much as we might have thought when we were younger, of like, don't tell me.
It's very much story as well, right? It's the idea of like, okay, like, is this role pivotal to like what's happening in the story, or is it something like you're just like walking around and like, oh, what do I see? And you're like, okay, we'll roll a perception. Like, essentially those rolls are necessary, but like failing the roll also won't drastically change the story in any way. So it's not like you need to be like hiding the roll or like being like hyping it up or anything. But yeah, just roll. You hit like a 10 and you'll get it. It's not like, oh, you know, we'll see what happens. It's you're looking around a street, like you're not trying to save someone's life in an operating room or something.
Yeah, I think Brendan does it really well.
Yeah.
I think you've seen all those episodes. Or like sometimes he'd be like, yeah, roll a perception check, DC 10. It just like is casual. He lets you know, but it's just like, just roll it. And then sometimes, okay, if you're gonna
Speaking
want
of Brendan
this.
with that, because I was just thinking of him too when we were talking about that, was I think that when a GM puts out a DC, you are inviting the players to talk about that DC with you, right? It's an invitation to have a conversation about how hard this thing should be. And so what Brendan often does when he gives a DC for something like that, either through just tone of voice, which they're all trained improvisers and they're really good at picking it up, but I think for a lot of people it won't be that easy. But you know, saying like, oh well, the wall's really slick, this is happening, the enemy's chasing you, you don't have a lot of time, so this is all going to make the DC, you know, 18. Like it raise all of those things are raising it, and then you know, often you'll get Emily and Allie, I think, are the two the shit disturbers, who are just like, well, what about I have these boots of, you know, springing, and it's like, that does that make it any easier? And then Brennan's like, okay, like what can I do? And I see Murphy in that pod too, where Emily, the whole crew of the band of boobs are always like, you know, like, oh well, I'm skilled in this, or I have an item that makes this easier, whatever it is, and then he will lower DCs, and like let the players influence the narrative in that way, and I like that. I think that's fun.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Like, because again, it is a story you're telling together. So like as those rules, there might be some that the GM is like adamant you can't change these rules at all. Others are that they're more open to playing around with.
Yeah.
Like yeah, no, you know what? I agree. Like I do think you would be able to affect the role with this item you have, or because you've had experience with this sort of thing before. We can lower the DC or whatever. Like it's something that can be, in a sense, haggled and negotiated.
But I often find now that I don't like hiding DCs. And one of the reasons is because I want new players, especially, to feel like there are reasons for why things are hard or easy. So I think it's more fun to explain them and then to put out the number and get the dice involved. Hiding things doesn't have the... who said that earlier? Was it Peter? Hiding things is not as fun as it used to be. Maybe it was CJ.
Yeah. Or like it's not as necessary as we once thought.
When you're young, it's like, oh, like what's it gonna be? Just roll the dice and find out. And now it's like, no, like these are all the cool things that are happening. Now roll the dice, and you in your head are gonna know when whatever number that falls on, whether it was good or bad.
It's a shift in general. Like how many times back in the day would somebody hand you like a note, like the GM hands you a secret note, just to like look at, and go into a whole separate room, like
I still do that.
The secret talk about stuff. I guess like
harder now.
I still like that. That's fun.
But I'm just saying, it's like it can still happen for sure, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's a lot more. It's less spontaneous, and it's just more of like an agreement across the table of what everyone wants. And we're adults now, so our time is a lot more valuable. When you're kids, you just get together, you play whatever, and random stuff happens. Maybe one person likes someone at the table a little bit more, and they're like handing them secret thing. I don't know. It's just like a whole different game, basically.
That's why Peter always.
Here's the thing. When I give information to a player, and it's information that the table should know, and I think as a DM, it's fun to have the player do the exposition in character, right? Even if it's out of character, it's like, oh, hey guys, I tell you everything I know, and then you just list a bunch of stuff that you know. But I think that's better than the DM always giving the lore or always doing it. It's like, I love it when I talk to a player a little bit separately, and it's like, oh, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, oh yeah, like this is kind of what I wanted. And it's like, okay, cool. Here's some information for you. You can give that to the party when you're ready.
I do like that.
Yeah.
That's a secret, but they can reveal it anytime they want. They can do it immediately.
I guess like the spirit of it is different than like Peter's. You seem to be remembering the times of like everything's a secret. Like I'm telling you this. But
yeah,
like,
and even you make a
others.
character that has lots of secrets. Like, ooh, I'm never even gonna reveal them.
Like it's just
versus like here's a gift.
Shit.
Give the rest of the party at your whim instead of like don't show them, don't tell them.
Don't tell anyone. No, that's not as fun. Also, that's a great way to create players who never ever want to engage with anything that you're doing. I have a player that I know who has just been burned too many times, basically. And now it's like every time an NPC shows up, they're just like, who the fuck is this guy? And it's like, hey, like he's a bard, he's a minstrel coming up, and then it's just like, no, get him out of here. Like we're like, I'm gonna fucking like talking to his party, he's like, let's kill him. And it's like, whoa, that escalated quickly.
Wheels Caldwell.
Wheels, that guy.
But before we move too far on the subject, Savage Worlds has 5 attributes compared to the others, so it's a bit more uneven. This is agility, smarts, spirit, strength, and vigor.
Spirit.
Yeah.
That's
So
an interesting
basically, it's agility, strength, smart, spirit, and then vigor. So you got 2 physical abilities, 2 mental abilities, and 1 that I think basically denotes your body. And then I think that's more of the, what does it say here? Endurance, resistance, and how much damage you can shake off. Spirit is wisdom, willpower, and recover from when you're injured. Smart.
Willpower.
Know the world and culture. Agility, nimbleness, quickness, dexterity. And strength is raw, physical power, and fitness.
Raw power.
Beautiful. So we talked about attributes, but we kind of also talked a little bit about the probability, about the dice that are used in the systems, and their advantages, I suppose. D20s have crits on either end, and then the 2d6 systems or systems with smaller dice sometimes employ exploding dice. Something I've not tried enough of. Like honestly, we played Kids on Bikes, but I barely remember anything about it. Like, you guys are talking about it, and it sounds like a whole new system to me. So you got to try that again.
Yeah.
But the exploding dice do sound like a lot of fun. It's just like a more frequent crit, but then it's extra hype when you get multiple in a row. And then we also talked a little bit about. I feel like we touched upon something else real quick, but my brain's already failing me.
Well, we talked about like what failing and succeeding looks like.
Yes,
I don't
okay,
know if
so
we covered everything.
Yeah, the ranges of success and failure. Do we want to keep talking about dice first?
Let me introduce the last system that I think I would want to have in the mix for attributes, which is the Cypher system or Numenera.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Right? Because that one only has 3. And the way that those attributes work mechanically compared to the other systems is much different. And I think that's also something that we should also focus on. So let me just finish. So everyone, we know the Cypher system, so I'll just go over it quickly for people at home, which is 3 attributes: strength. Actually, what is it called? Do you guys remember? I think it's might.
It's might, speed, intelligence, and
Is it intelligence? Is that what it's called?
I think
pretty
it
sure.
is. It's not mind, is it?
It's intellect. Sorry, it's intellect. Not intelligence.
Intellect. That's what it is. It's might, speed, and intellect. So it's might, speed, intellect, and then basically you spend points from each of those pools to do things. So it's a very clean split of like your body, and then technique, which is a mix of body and mind, and then mind, which is the intellect. For me, it's like this is the most boiled down of the attributes you can get, without just going into a duality system, which I think is never that fun. So it's like you have both concepts and the middle ground. So this is the big difference that I'm seeing here between all of the systems we talked about. This one's a pool of points that you use. The other ones are dice that you can use. And then you have the like D&D 5th edition and DC20, which is like focused on the modifier that is a byproduct of the count. Yeah. And Dungeon World is like that too.
Yeah. I kind of skipped over Die, the role-playing game. It does have the 6 attributes, but you don't roll any D20s. Before I forget to mention that, you use pools, like instead of pools like Cypher, where it's like a number that you pull from, you have pools of dice. So if your strength is a 3, then you have 3 D6 that you roll. And if your strength is a 4, you have 4. If your strength is a 1, you have 1. So the number directly correlates to how many dice that you're rolling. And then it's just a number of successes that you're counting versus failures. So low difficulty, 1 success works. But the higher difficulties, the more successes are removed from your pool, like by the DM. And depending on characters, you can add other dice. There's like special interactions in that way, but like when it boils down to that, it's just add 1d6 times whatever your attribute is. Roll that. If you get a 4 or above, it counts as a success. If you get a 6, it's an incredible success. So it borrows from D&D, but then it kind of strays.
Mhm.
I've never played it, so I can't speak to how I feel about it.
But I do like the aspect of being above the DC by a certain amount is what decides if it's like a critical success or not,
Mhm.
rather than it having to be that 20.
Mhm.
Like, yes, rolling that 20 is great, but like being able to roll like a 14 when the DC is like a 9, and then still getting that like incredible effect, like that incredible benefit, is still nice, because it's like, okay, well, I still did really good based on the roll and like based on what I needed to do, but I didn't like have to get that like 5% chance of a roll.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I see that of like a DC 8 roll 17, and you're like, I fucking nailed it. And this is a legit mechanic that is like, no, he nailed it. You have to reward him.
Yeah, in DC20 they have a combination of that with it's a D20 system, but every time you beat something by 5, it improves it.
Yes.
So your result gets better as the higher you roll.
Oh my god! So if you get like a plus 10, it's like a double raise.
Yeah, I only really saw for combat. I'm not sure if it works outside of combat, but it's like if you get 5 more, there's a tag. There's like a special word that denotes exactly what happens. Then if you get 10 above, and then even 15, there's like different mechanics that happen.
Okay.
So it's like incentivizing, like, oh, you didn't get the crit, but you still got a really good roll.
Yes, to not feel bad about like
those
to be like, yeah, because like there's so many times where, like, you roll a 19 and you're like, oh, like, yes, I go with a 19 with modifier to 20, like 25, but like it's not that 20.
Mm-hmm.
So you still rolled incredibly well, but it's like, yeah, but you still just get a success.
Yeah.
You know, okay, all right. I mean, yeah, it's cool, but
Unless you're in combat and then you have a combat ability that lets you crit on like 19 to 20
yeah,
or something.
Right.
Yeah, but like how many
Even
classes?
that's
Like,
so
two classes
specific,
have
like-
that.
So one thing I'm hearing after discussing all of these systems is that I think for us, rolling dice and spending resources to do things is inextricably tied to attributes. Does that sound correct to everybody?
Yeah.
Wait, repeat that?
Yes, I do like the fact that like rolling dice is like integral to this, and like the stats should be like tied to rolling of the dice, and that allowing you to then perform your abilities to the degree the dice like allow you to.
Yeah, so stat points or characteristics or the numerous ways we can phrase what these are you very much tied to rolling dice and determining outcomes, and spending resources, which is I think the additional thing that I'm discovering as we talk about this that was not included in that original description. And the spending resources part is like basically there's the Cypher and die systems, which have the pools of dice and the point pools where you spend from that pool. In the Savage Worlds and Kids on Bikes where you explode, there's like a fun other mechanic that comes in that lets you like have more resources to like help define the outcome in a way. And then in the D20 systems, there's like the critical fail, critical success, and then DC20 has the multiple raises. So there's always something else here that helps you either fail more or succeed more.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and we haven't even talked about a lot of the D&D like homebrew stuff where in D&D there's also advantage and disadvantage, which greatly impacts rolls on D20 systems, which the other systems don't have as much. And not to mention I've played D&D in the past where we had hero dice as well, and then we had an amount of hero dice per level, and so basically you only replenish those every time you level up.
Interesting.
But I think all of that feeds back into ability modifier or ability points.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, the roleplay game. You add to your pool for advantage, and you remove before you roll with disadvantage. So you could be in a super advantageous position, and your DM could be like, okay, your positioning's good, 1 advantage. Your weapon is like extremely good, 2nd advantage. Like the sun is high behind you, so you're like, well hidden. People can't see you. 3 advantage. So you add 3 more d6 to your pool, and then you roll them. So it's not quite the reroll advantage that we're familiar with, but it makes your roll more advantageous still. And then in the same way, if you have 4d6 in your pool, he could be like, well, you're stuck in the mud, take 1 out. I like that you can stack advantages in this system, because sometimes it's like, well, you can't have double advantage, so you just have 1 advantage. Here it's like, no, you can have triple, quadruple advantage if you work hard enough to put yourself in that position.
What did Cypher call? They had that too, right? Where it was made stuff harder or made it easier.
Assets.
What's it called?
Assets. And hindrances or something.
I think flaws potentially.
In Fates?
Yeah. No, not Fates.
Cypher.
What was it?
Sorry,
Numenera or Cypher.
Numenera. Yeah, it was assets. Yeah.
I'm sure the others were. I didn't use them as much. I'll just say hindrances.
Well, there was like edge and was it focus?
The edge was a flat subtraction from your pool, from your stat pool for when you spend points. Which feeds into the, as you get to be a stronger hero, it just takes less effort to do the cool things, which I liked that evolution. I gotta update the characteristics that define attributes are characteristics that define inherent strengths and weaknesses that determine numerical outcomes.
Peter.
Where does the spending resources fit here?
What was that?
Spending resources. I don't know if we touched too much on that.
Page.
Oh yes,
25.
I'm so far. Wait, do I have the right book here? Is that understand? Planning your advancement choices? That doesn't seem right. Dictate.
It says page 25 of 416. It has an 8 at the bottom, so maybe. Yeah, try page 8. I guess there's a
This
bunch
is
of
the DIE book. What are the attributes in DIE?
So it's the regular 6 strength, dex, con, all the good ones. But you have defensive statistics, which are up on the board now.
You have other statistics?
Yeah, the guard, health, willpower, and defense.
Oh, that's like resistance will and.
So, like
What's
guard is their ability to avoid taking damage and stay out of the way. But once it's depleted, you don't get it like right back. You don't apply it to every roll. It's like your guard is up and it's working, but as soon as it's down, now is when you start taking actual health damage, and it has to like reset in order for you to get guard back. Health is usual defensive statistic. Once it goes to 0, you're down. Willpower is your ability to resist emotional manipulation, and your defense is how difficult you are to hit. So like I was saying, if like difficulties will remove successes from your final roll, your defense is equal to your difficulty to hit. So if you try and hit someone with a defense of 2, once you roll, you have to subtract 2 successes from your final rolls. And if you have none left, you don't hit them.
Oh.
It's a little bit of like a gather your dice, address the state of the dice, and add/subtract before you roll. Then roll, then address that and subtract if you have to, and then you get your final count, which determines Success, fail, great success.
That's quite different.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps there.
Yeah,
I feel like once you, like, for me, that would take me forever to wrap my head around it. But like once you have it, then I feel like it becomes very simple.
Yeah.
Because it's just a matter of, is one of these a pass, as opposed to like calculating them all together,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
At the end of the day, you just need 1 4
Mhm.
in your pool, and you succeed.
Okay.
But to get there, it's a little complicated.
Mhm.
Kind of like Cypher at the beginning. We're like, wait, what's my edge? What do I add to this?
Oh yeah, I still have trouble with it.
By the last session, we were like rolling, adding stuff.
Cypher's overall less stuff in a way, but then it's also more stuff in a way. So. I modified the definition. I think I've figured it out. Attributes are characteristics that define inherent strengths and weaknesses, which determine numerical outcomes that are affected by the available dice rolled. Very long thing, but basically, they're things that define the inherent parts of your character on a numerical level, and basically they're always affected by the dice at the end of the day. And that's the common thread here, even in die, like the adding and removing all of these dice before or whatever it is, and then after changes things. In D&D, advantage or disadvantage, you add dice to it and then take a specific one. All of the ones that replace the stat with the dice, and then even with Cypher with the pools, you still have to spend effort and things like that and use the skills before you roll the dice. And then that determines the difficulty at the end of the day.
I like that definition.
It's pretty good. All encompassing.
It's big. Interesting to see all these examples side by side. And
in terms of the numbers tied to these attributes, sorry, CJ, is there a page number specifically for those 6 attributes?
Yeah. Go up just a couple pages to page 7. It just gives the general rundown of what they are.
Page 7. Oh, yeah, right here. I passed it. Okay. And then they bring up numbers between 0 and 4. Oh, I can't go above 4.
No. So that's another thing
Small.
to actually think about. You know, like at the end of the day, D&D, you really are looking at the modifier, which is a small number. Some systems just forego the bigger number and just give you the small number to look at. There is, I understand, when you level up, adding 2 to an attribute is a lot less meaningful when it's that +2 gives you a +1 instead of having to add 2 and then always gaining +2 to the number. So I understand, being able to play around with getting a +1 from this source and a +1 from here, and then not adding up to be too much. Everything is basically cut in half. Every 2 points is 1 point. But sometimes putting 1 in an attribute where everything is already even feels really crappy. Especially later in the game where you're I don't think I'm really going to get another +1 to this attribute. So it's just going to sit at a nasty 17. And it's not.
Yeah, you have to be preemptive too. You know, you start thinking oh, I'm gonna purposely leave this as an odd number so that when I level up, I'll put 1 point into it instead of 2. And
Which is fun for me and for some people. You figure that out.
But it's just
put 1 here, then I can put 1 there.
It's busy work.
I think that's a little. So I think now is the time where we start putting stuff into yes and no categories. Now that we have all of this stuff, a yes for me is always when the crunchy part, which is the building part of the sheet, right? That lets you know once I roll whatever amount of dice it is, what the outcome will be. I always want the thing that lets you know what to roll dice for to have a narrative hook. So for me, putting attribute points into different categories kind of arbitrarily and then having those become modifiers, which are then the thing that you add to the dice that tells you the outcome, is just too distanced from everything. I want that path of understanding to be shorter, if that makes sense.
Hence,
Oh, for
like
sure.
assigning a dice and being like, that's the dice you roll and that's the results you get. No pluses or minuses at all.
As close as possible. Like, I like the when you replace an attribute with a dice rolled. That is such an easy, like, I am stronger than other people, I roll a bigger dice. Like, the connection is so instantaneous. And like, I think, don't forget too, like, we're having this whole conversation about attributes. I think that everyone here agrees that whatever system we make, we would want there to be skills. In some way, shape, or form, you know, skills or abilities or whatever it is, and those always modify the outcomes of rolls, right? Sometimes you are worse at things or better at things. So there's always going to be a slightly longer path because of skills.
Yeah,
but
it would just be because like that I think also is a completely separate situation, like discussion even, because there's the different ways that different systems utilize skills, right? Like how Cypher and Numenera use skills as assets versus how D&D uses it with like being additional modifiers to add to your roll, and others just being like, oh, you'll get like advantage because you're like you have skill in this or whatever. Like, so that would be like a whole different discussion as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's too much for today, but I do think like we can all know that it is like another modifier to a roll. And so basically if we start at the attribute as like, this is where the path starts to rolling a dice to get an outcome, and then it's like there's like fucking 10 things in there, and then you got the skill stuff, and then you can finally know, hopefully there's nothing else in that path, right? Before you know that outcome. Like, it gets to be very long. So for me, I think like the most concise way that we can do this and have it feel good is probably the best way.
Absolutely agreed. We had written up something. It's probably a good thing to look at after today's chats on how to address it. So I'm going to make sure to write that down. But like, that's something that me and Peter addressed in our brainstorming, was like that instep that is meaningless. Like, let's find a way to get rid of that and make the path feel like you're actually, when you're increasing an attribute, you're increasing the attribute. You're not increasing the like kind of arbitrary number that then becomes the attribute.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Having just like the big attribute, but really it doesn't equal the actual number that it is just it's like an old school way of doing it. It's not really necessary. I think there were probably rules in place in old school D&D or that made it so it had to be that way. But I think that that's been lost. Like, when you look at it, really, like, why can't you just have your modifier instead of the attribute, you know?
I think off the top of my head, I can figure out a few reasons why D&D.
Yeah, I mean, we did touch upon
Balance
a
and
little bit,
scale.
but it's like creating that little step in between, you know, so you're not always getting too much. Like, I guess it could be like if you, because 2 points equals 1 in D&D. So again, it's like, it slows down the process. You don't get so strong way too fast.
I'm gonna go in a different direction, which is, I think that there are relics of the past that are still attached to these big attribute scores. One of these is like fighting ghosts and stuff, and like ghosts like will literally give you negative an amount of strength, right?
Oh yeah.
Basically,
right.
they touch you too often, then you like get frailer and frailer. But it's removing the big point, and then it only affects the little points every 2, right? But I think that is more of a, when they rewrote the system, they were like, we don't want to rewrite every single monster into having a different thing, and they just left it. So it is anachronistic, and like I fully agree that like I think they had reasons for this, and the reasons are bad. Like, bad.
Yeah. Some of those monster abilities are really cool in theory, but like actually using them, they always feel a little weird, you know.
One of my favorites with ghosts is when you age people like 10 years. It's horrible. It feels terrible.
Or like I think it's old. I don't know if the wraiths in 5e can do it, but they could like literally sap your levels away, like make you
I don't
weaker.
think they can do it in 5e anymore.
Jesus Christ.
I think it's probably just HP, like max HP they reduce or something.
That's like an evil DM thing where like the party just levels up
Yeah.
and then you make them fight that.
But could you imagine that? Like, and sometimes the later levels take you forever, but imagine just like losing a level, like going from 10 to 9 or something, or a bigger one like 11 to 10.
In D&D, the levels are all roughly the same amount of experience between them.
Really?
Really?
No, it definitely
they
takes
have a weird
longer.
distribution curve. Hold on, I'm looking it up right now.
Okay, I'm fairly certain that it takes a lot longer. Later
A
on.
lot.
Like when we were
Remember
doing niches,
Misha's?
I would have to
Yeah.
give like tons. Like at the end of the session,
5,000
everybody
every
gets
session.
5,000 XP. You know, just to get everyone to level 20. I'm not too sure. I did want to say though, because we talked about the attributes and the numbers
Mhm.
attached to them. For DC20, it's tiny numbers also. Your attribute is your modifier, and it can't. The highest you can get, I think, is 7. So you know, it's fairly small, manageable.
Does it go 0 to 7, or is there a minimum?
Is there a negative?
Check. Maybe we can check. Attribute limit. Here we go.
Am I looking right? Is that
So
correct?
PC at level 1, your attribute limit is +3. I don't know if
Oh,
there's
limit.
necessarily negatives. Oh, you start with a -2 in all of your attributes, and then you get 12 attribute points
Oh,
to increase them how you like. And at first level, the limit is 3.
damn.
So it's essentially like,
-2 to 7.
yeah, I don't know. Fairly simple, I think.
Does it do away with attributes versus skills? Like, do you have like proficiency in athletics that's under strength in DC20?
So
I'm
it's,
asking too many.
yeah, I think so. I didn't really
Okay,
look at the
okay,
skills. I
that's
focused
fine.
more on like stats and combat related stuff.
Because if you're getting a +7 from your strength, and then you're adding like a plus whatever for your proficiency bonus.
Oh, I see. There
Or
is
you're,
no
like,
proficiency
yeah.
bonus in this.
Okay.
There's something called the prime modifier, and that's typically what's tied to your class. Like, you know how every class sort of has their main class attribute. But in this one, the way it works is that whatever your highest stat is your prime attribute. So if you want to play like a
Oh.
intelligent barbarian, some specific features might not get the best benefit out of strength, but you'll also have you'll have features and things that use the prime modifier. So if your intelligence is 3 and your strength or might is 2 or whatever, you'll still get the full benefit of your class.
I like that. DC20 allows for intelligent barbarians.
I mean, the way you flavor that is up to you, right? So,
Yeah. Barbarians.
I see you put a link in here, Brent.
I did. So the link in here, this link's to an old thread. This is not where I saw this originally, but it does explain it fairly well. So
Oh my, there's a graph further down here.
yes, so there's multiple graphs on this page, and there's like different, like if you go even further down, there's a graph for CR rating and experience. Basically, the way that this works, right? This person sums it up well. Interestingly, this seems to suggest tiers of play, where mid-levels require more combats and higher levels require fewer. So it looks like the answer to the question may be to look at encounter XP progression and work backwards from there. And basically, when you look at CR rating and how much experience it gives, it is like a parabolic line. So it basically, the higher the CR, exactly the more XP you get. And so the way that D&D works is that when you are low level, you progress very fast, all of a sudden, basically, then when you are mid-level, you progress very slow for a really long time. The game is meant to make you kind of stick at those levels. And then when you get to high level again, it starts to speed up.
That's cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. So
And it feels that way, right? Like even from all of our experiences, where like when you're in mid tier, it's like you have to do so many freaking combats, and as a DM, you're putting encounters together, and you're like, okay, but if I use this thing, they'll die. Like I can't do that.
I don't know. I never had that problem.
You're like,
I can't kill anybody.
level
I'm so
8
bad at
party,
killing.
we just put a red dragon in here, play it like perfectly. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm not good at this stuff with the graphs and the. Man, the XP numbers get so big too. Like 300,000. Oh my goodness.
Yes, 300,000, but it's only 50,000 experience gain from the previous level. That's what you have to. That's the number you're looking at. Really, is like the change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Like what? I really don't know. How would you fix this problem? Because this is kind of like an old school thing, also, right? Like, or it's like a video game thing too, just like huge amounts of EXP and.
It is, and so they have fixed this in newer games, right? Like all of the Powered by the Apocalypse stuff, where you ask questions and things like that. Like it's all geared towards a linear progression style, which feels more accurate and feels like, okay, I'm making steps. This is very obviously geared towards keeping you kind of low level for as long as possible, so that it is like it's in this enjoyable sweet zone. There's like Goldilocks zone, and then you get out of it, and then you kind of like head towards the end of the campaign, which is, I don't know about that. I think I would like to play more consistently high level campaigns. The problem is this: it's that a high level campaign in this system is obviously not geared towards most of the mechanics that were invented for the system. In our system, I think if we did it linearly, we would avoid that problem.
I think an issue with that is also the fact that it's very combat oriented as well. Because in 5e, the only way to get XP is from combat.
Yeah.
There's no, like, I mean, unless the DM creates it so, there is no way that they can then be like, okay, you just had like a very like heavy political impact on this kingdom, here's 10,000 experience kind of thing. There's no mechanic for that in the game. Everything XP oriented is all combat.
And I agree. I think our system, one, should have a mechanic, like a storytelling experience mechanic, but two, this is exposing for me right now, like attributes are affected by levels.
That too.
For sure. Yeah, so you can't get rid of that tie between gaining experience and leveling up and your attributes changing, which are affecting your roles. Like, you know, you affect one thing, you affect everything else. If you're leveling up too fast, your attributes are constantly changing. If you're not leveling up fast enough, you're always rolling with the same pluses, and it's like, am I not getting any better at this character? I do like the questions. Maybe, I don't know if they would be the only way, but I definitely like them. Like, if not all, then maybe an aspect of a system. Whether it's just like character questions that you have to ask.
I actually don't like the questions that much.
No?
No, I think they're
specific, I find.
They're fun, but they're too specific. And there's some, like, the question I hate the most is, did you find out anything interesting about this world?
Yeah.
Because isn't that why we play? Like, that's what we're always trying to have fun and do interesting things together.
Yeah.
And so
shouldn't you gain a little experience when you do that?
You should, but I think that we could maybe develop a better mechanic for that, where we incentivize the storytelling component from the players more. because for an interesting thing to be introduced into the world, I think the onus is a little bit on the DM in these systems with the questions, where it's like, I showed you a new cool thing, and then you all kind of like explored that a little bit, and then that's when we can say yes to that question. Where I think we can develop a mechanic where if people, interact or like complete quests or something, like, and we like give like a template for how to build a quest kind of thing, and then you complete that quest, like this is how much experience can be gained from it. And so that there's incentives for the players to be moving towards outcomes, to gain resources, right? And then that means that you're not worried about those resources session to session. You're worried about doing the in-story thing. So doing the story thing just passively gets you don't have to focus on that.
Yeah. I think having questions that maybe aren't specific, even having having rules that aren't are suggested, always they kind of get swept under the rug, so maybe not. But like leaving open-ended questions where that maybe the DM could be like, okay, these next few sessions are geared toward answering this question as yes. So everybody has the same question. Once we're able to answer yes, we're all going to be able to level up together. Or, as a group, if we can answer yes.
I think it's more interesting to make a note about like character creation and being like, when you create a character, you should have some like questions that you need to create and then be able to pass those to your DM. And then your DM can use those when planning their story. But I don't know if that should be tied to XP necessarily. Like basically, I think it's more of a stars and wishes thing, right?
But see, I think that's why I like milestones so much, is because it's kind of like, okay, there's no set, you don't have to decide like, this fetch quest is worth 5,000 experience. This donate your funds to this church is worth this much experience. It's once you feel like it's an appropriate time in the story, you just defeated this like large boss, the party like put in their all and they managed to just like win by this like the skin of their teeth, then they get that level up. It feels deserved. It feels kind of like very like impactful. And so like I enjoy that better than experience.
I agree, but I am hesitant because of the arbitrariness of the milestone system.
It is very subjective.
Yeah.
There's no way to be able to like kind of gauge your where you are in the leveling up. You're like, okay, well, am I close to leveling up? Am I going to be leveling up in the next couple sessions, or do I have to wait till God knows when in the story?
That it mitigates expectations for players when they're playing, and like you avoid the when are we going to level up questions. like my home game, I was like harassed for like a month of when are we going to level up, and I basically caved and was like, fine, when you finish this quest, like, we'll get there. And then there was a boss and there was a bunch of stuff that happened. Like that was my plan, but it was like, don't ask me, right? Like it's going to happen when it happens because it's milestone. But I think it's easier when it's less arbitrary. Everybody can agree to it. There's a framework to rely on. And even for
to that though, I just want to like a quick add-on. Your home game, is it a lot of newer players?
I have 3 new players.
Because what I was going to say is like, do you think that there are specific ways of leveling up that are potentially more geared towards the experience level the character, like the players have in the game?
Well, I think Milestone is geared towards more experienced players, and
That's what I'm saying. Like, more like role players, like things like that, because they don't really like feel as fulfilled by like combat, or like, but like combat focused players will be like very much, I need that experience. I need to know where, like, when I'm gonna get my next level up and get stronger.
But you can have a newbie to either of those things, right? You can have like a newbie role-playing player, and you can have a newbie combat player. And like right now I'm dealing kind of like with both of those, where it's like some of them are better at combat, some of them are better at role-playing, and then that it's not like a transferable skill where like one of the things that happens in the home game right now, this is using D&D 5th edition, right, is like they go into combat and they don't really know the other classes that well, and then they haven't role played in character about what their positioning or what their strategy should be when they fight. And so what happens is a fully uncoordinated battle where people are just doing stuff, and they're always so close to dying. And I'm standing there as the DM, like, I really don't want a TPK right now. And then they pull by the skin of their teeth, and I'm like, okay, you did it. And they're like, wow, we should work more together. And then it's the same thing in the next combat. So as the DM now, my job is like to have a talk with everyone and be like, hey, like your characters should talk to each other about maybe how they want to approach combat, right? And help guide their learning. But it would be cool if there was mechanics around some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. There's a problem with having the numbers just tied to combat, like you mentioned, but then there's also kind of a problem of just having it tied to narrative.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I like the questions because I think that it creates a need for the player and the DM to sort of communicate and be on the same page, and the way they do it in Powered by the Apocalypse is it includes everybody at the end of the session. So it just like creates all this very natural, like, yeah, let's play this game together and go through, you know, the steps and phases of the game. It's almost like a magic game, you know. You have like your end phase or the end step, and then you have to do all the, you know, go down the list of things that you have to do. And I do like that because it almost gamifies it a little bit. I just wish it was pushed a little bit more in the direction of like the communication, I guess. Like, I think I brought this up on the end of the Ashlands, the last session we did there, where, you know, we have all these bonds and things that, you know, can lead to EXP. You have these like quests or goals that you want to accomplish, you know, and those are more interesting than the one they give you like tied to your character sheet. So it's like more of that, more built together with the players and the DM, finding exactly what kind of quests and challenges you want your character to go through, and then maybe also tying some EXP to combat because, you know, combat's pretty important.
Yeah, I think like questions is the right answer, but the questions that we've seen so far are not. They don't solve the problem. But yeah, if we can find like a rubric to blank insert your questions here that fit in this rubric so that it's not arbitrary questions, maybe that's the option. Or just finding questions that are so perfect that they can be applied to every session.
Well, what I would like to propose is not questions and is just experience, but experience per encounter. And an encounter it could be role playing, it could be combat, it could be puzzle, and because I'm always pushing for no separation between combat and role play, right? I just want them to be one as close as possible. So for me, if you can do experience per encounter, then it starts to be okay. Well, when I plan my session, these are the encounters I'm planning, and that means that I'm planning about this much XP per each one of these, right? And then the improvisation you can do on the fly is often like, oh, well, I want to throw something else in here. And it's like, what can I do? And then basically you're kind of like, you have like almost like a CR, but you have a CR that encompasses like, you know, this enemy is worth this much when you fight them, but they're only worth this much if you talk through it, or right? Like, it's like you get to the bridge and there's a troll, and like you paid the troll a toll to get to the other side, but you had to talk to him and role play giving him that money and then getting through as a group all together and agreeing on this. And like, I think that's worth something. And then there's the other route where it's like you come back, or even like that first time you just killed it, and then it's like, okay, well, now what? Like, that's a different choice. You know, it's also worth experience. Like, it's also something that you all decided on together that you potentially talked about.
I think I guess like I'm just not too sure about everyone getting XP kind of at the same time.
Mhm.
Right? Like in that situation, there might only be one person who's really doing the talking or the planning, you know? And there might be like 3 dudes who would have preferred to just rush in head first and beat the shit out of the troll. So it's like, should just the one person get the EXP, or do they all deserve the EXP?
That's a good question.
So it's like, if somehow the EXP is also tied to like what your character fantasy is and like what you're trying to get out of the character and the story, I think that's important too. And like if we gamify that in some way so that even new players are expecting to be part of like the whole, storytelling process.
Yeah. You're convincing me right now, and I'm liking it. I think this is a fucking Porquelo no los dos. Have encounters with experience, and then have questions that do address these things that also give experience. And I think there's something I really love about what you're saying about gamifying the questions, because if we gamify those questions and involve them in character development, basically we're forcing people to do stars and wishes to get experience towards their characters, but by doing stars and wishes we make better stories. So if everybody's always answering all their questions except your one friend, it's like, hey, do we need to give him more screen time? Does the DM maybe need to involve their character more, or give like more hooks or whatever it is? Like, it'll become very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so true.
And you brought up stars and wishes, and I saw briefly in the die role-playing game that there was something about stars and wishes. I don't know if you know
saw more
anything
than I
about
did.
that. Okay. I saw it like a split second, and I was like, oh, we did that once for Avatar. And now it's gone. Might not be able to find it.
Give stars and wishes. Closing ritual.
So one thing I'm not a big fan of in TTRPGs, but I don't know if like I just haven't experienced it very much, so I don't know if like maybe I could be on board, is when players are different levels. Sometimes when there's too many levels between players, there's like a skill gap between the characters, and it doesn't feel very good. One or two can be fine, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, and Misha's, people were kind of, because
Different
not everyone
levels.
could play every session, so some
That's
people
it.
had fluctuating levels.
Yeah, but in Misha's it felt mostly okay. Like I don't think anyone ever felt like they were overpowered or underpowered.
But that's it. So I'm saying, like, would there be something that to avoid doing, if like so that we don't run into that situation that you can think of, or?
I don't know. I wonder if it's something like, for me as the DM, it was like if someone's always doing all the talking, and that means that they're doing all of the encounters, and so they would potentially get all of the experience for those encounters. Like if we're going by that encounter system that we said, maybe I would do like, you can max be like 2 levels ahead of your companion, and then after that you have to donate that experience to other party members. And the way that you would donate that experience is somehow mechanically part of the story.
Ooh, like a
Pushing the other person to talk. Yeah, what do you think about this?
Basically, yeah, it's like on a mechanical level in your sheet, you are the leader because you're two big like levels above. But then also as the leader, you're like, okay, well, now I have to start involving people. So the DM's like, yep, and you're max level, so how do you involve? And then you like roll a dice, and you're like, you. And then it's like you have to like start giving experience to everybody else.
Interesting. Right off the bat, that makes me. That feels like something that would have been in the Avatar game, almost like a move. Like I don't know, teach someone something that you know.
Mentor, yeah.
Yeah, and then you donate the XP that you can't even use. Maybe you could even like hoard some of it at like your max level, but you can't use it to get to the next level, and so you just like hand it over to somebody else.
Well, so Cypher has a thing where you spend XP, right? And like you can spend XP to influence the story.
Oh yeah.
And basically, like your DM is like, this happens, and you're like, I spend an XP that doesn't happen. Which to me was crazy when we started using it. I was just like, oh my god, like what do I do now? Like,
it is crazy. We didn't use it very often, but the implications, I think it changes the whole game too.
Yes.
But I kind of like
Scary.
that. I kinda
It's
like the
scary
idea.
and like in a good way. I'm like, it's like thrilling.
Hmm.
It's like, oh my god, I don't have control of this at all, and that's like, whoa!
Did we just create taxes in TTRPGs? Like, if you make up more than this tax bracket, you're taxed at this.
Give it to the
percent.
poor.
Yeah,
Gotta give it-
trickle
According to
down.
capitalism. Capitalism's like, hey, if I make more, I keep it.
Yeah.
As soon as like
God.
communism, because you're sharing it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
this is communism. That's
Yeah,
basically
usually
what
it's communism.
it
Because
is.
I'm thinking of like like me when I started having trouble coming out of my shell. If I was like not kind of punished for it, that wouldn't feel good. Like, you know, I'm trying to role play, but like I'm not used to it. All these people are good. Like I'm trying to find my space in, but it's just hard. And then like that guy gets all the experience, and I get so much little. I like what Brent did of like you get more, but once you're capped out, it's on to you to like kind of give it to the weakest link or give it to the players who are lacking in experience and form bonds with them. I love that. I love it. I love it.
I just can't wait for that time. Like, okay, you're capped. Now figure out a way to give it to everybody else and make it work. The story, like,
I think this exists in a board game already. I probably played it with somebody here. It'll probably come up eventually.
if you can think of it, let us know.
You
'cause
gain resources, but then at a certain point, you have to give the extra to somebody else. I feel like I've encountered that because then, like, it promotes that player helping you out later on. You know. Oh, it's that Adventure Time one that we used to always
Munchkin.
play. Munchkin, where it's like I'll help you, or if you help me, I'll give you some of what I get.
it's like a
It's like,
trade.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
So it's
slip
not the
you
same,
into
but
this room or something. If yeah.
Well, in Munchkin also, I believe like you can only have a certain number of cards in your hand at the end of the turn, and then you
Oh,
donate
that was it.
cards
That was it.
to the lowest
Yes.
level player. Yeah,
That was it.
very fun mechanic, and makes you like when you're in last, you're like, oh yeah, at least I get free stuff.
Yeah, very true. Oh, I love Gatla.
Thankfully, TTRPGs of this style are collaborative and not competitive. We'll release a different, separate competitive module later
you
on.
actually sick, dude. Competitive TTRPG. Wasn't there a, what was it called? Dungeon? No, not Dungeon. It's Adventure League for D&D. That's
Adventure
like
League.
that's like
No idea.
it's not competitive, but it's like the esports of TTRPG, maybe.
What? I gotta
What?
look at that. What is Adventure
Yo,
League?
get me in there.
Adventure League. It's like you make a character, you go through a
What?
dungeon, and you have to like survive basically.
That's pretty cool.
I don't think there's any homebrew. It's just everything by the book.
Oh yeah, it's the official organized play system of D&D. It allows your character to travel from one game table to another, across the world, and even through digital play, all while keeping your character's progress and loot intact. Oh.
It's probably where you find all the min-maxers. I
mean,
think
for
it's like it's
sure.
purely just for playing with the mechanics. I don't think really it's too much about the role play for those. Well, I'm sure it is too, obviously, but
Do we want to talk about leveling up in other systems, or have we not gotten to that in our
Well, we
research?
talked a little bit about like experience, milestone, the questions. That is leveling up. Or are you talking about something else?
Like the ones that you came with, like Kids on Bike, DC20. Like, have you gotten to that? part
find
of
it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can certainly find it. I think it works similar. I haven't seen what like the monsters are or challenge rating. Like I don't know how much EXP those things give. Let's see. I was not prepared.
That's no, like if we're not prepared, we're not prepared. But since we're talking about it now,
I'm curious now.
it'd be nice to compile all the information.
Yeah, it's something that I didn't even really consider when I was looking up information on this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess like with Dungeons and Dragons, it usually boils down to milestone. Even when I was handing out EXP as a DM, it was kind of just all over the place, you know.
Yeah.
Like, this much would be probably good for your level.
Sometimes I'd be like, what the fuck did you just give us? Like, you just dump experience on us? I'm like, before he changes his mind, quick.
yeah. I was very generous, but I also wanted you guys to hit level 20, so.
Yeah.
It took 6 years.
I'll start by saying the role-playing game has questions, but it's if you answer yes to one of them, everybody levels up. So they're big questions that you're not necessarily going to answer every session. Did you complete a major adventure in a new locale? Did you defeat, neutralize, or befriend a major foe? So like they add on those kind of like words so that you could be like, that was a foe, but it wasn't a major foe. Did anyone in the group reach a major emotional moment of truth and understanding? That's fucking like blowing my mind right now. Did the group uncover something that they've been striving to know? Like these questions, you could try and weasel your way into a yes, which I don't love. You know, when the DM's like, fine, I'll fucking give it to you, even though I feel like I shouldn't. In Dungeon World, it didn't matter. It was one experience, but this, it's like a whole level. So I don't love this, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
To reward a major emotional moment with a group level up, that's interesting.
Just striving to know is like, man, I wonder what the weather today is. And he's like, I look
Yeah,
up.
exactly.
Like, I go outside, ask somebody. It's like, I strove to know.
Level up.
Cypher, I think I basically gave XP per encounter. It was like, what did the party accomplish? Excuse me. And basically it was like, if you had a scene and you spoke to someone, and then you went to a store, and then you had another scene where you spoke to someone, and then you had a fight, like that for me would usually be between like 2 XP. But if the fight was like took like, you know, half of the next session, you know, and it was like you defeated the boss or something, then I might maybe gave 1 XP for all the roleplay leading up to the fight, and then I gave 2 XP for the fight. Right? Like it was always like, was that a minor NPC or a major NPC? And so if you talk to like a bunch of minor NPCs, it'd be like 1 XP. And then if like you spoke to somebody and that was like, this is a quest hook, and you guys hooked on it, and then you went to the next place and you accomplished something there too, I was like, oh, that's definitely 2 XP right there.
Would you want the system to have like a rubric that details things like that and says 1 XP for minor this, 1 XP for major this?
I think we should, as like the rule, like this is how it should be built, and then people will just homebrew what they want to homebrew, right? So
Yeah.
I think we talked about this of like, I think that there's going to, like, I would want to give like a template for like, this is a minor quest versus like, you know, a notable quest versus a major quest. Like this is a minor NPC versus a notable NPC versus a major NPC. And then do that for villains, do that for monsters. And like, I think that there are guides that we can give people, and it's like, oh, if you fight a wolf, you get an amount. If you fight the leader of the wolf pack, you get an amount, right? And what does the leader of the wolf pack mean? Well, it means he has an extra ability that synergizes the wolves or something. And then if you fight the reborn wolf lord, the wolf king leading a wolf army, right? And then what does that mean? Well, okay, well, he has a bunch of extra abilities, and like, oh, and he can talk. So it's like, okay, right? Like, there's a different amount of XP you get for that one.
And then there are systems that don't level up at all, like Kids on Bikes.
True.
There's not even a level indicator on the stat on like the character sheets.
Huh. No advancements or anything?
The only thing I can see being an advancement is age. Because Kids on Bikes have like kids, teens, and adults. in their
That's
like
kinda
character
cool.
separation. So if you really like went through like, okay, you start off like with your first campaign at like age 10 or 12 kind of thing, and then you're like, okay, season 2, 6 years later, you're teens, you're 18 kind of thing. Then season 3, okay, we're pushing. You guys are 32 now, kind of thing. Like it's just then you have like those different like instigations of like levels. In a
We've
sense,
reached
your
the
character
third
sheet
stage
would
of kids on
change.
No.
But that's like the only like level that I could see possible in what I see on the sheets, anyways, on Kids on Bikes. There's no mention of like, oh yeah, if you fail a roll, you get a point towards your level up. You get experience. There's no experience questions after a session. There's nothing.
Did we level up in Avatar?
Yes, they have the same kind of idea of if you fail a roll, you gain experience, and there's questions at the end of the session. You also use to gain experience.
In Avatar, you don't. Did you gain experience for failing rolls?
Pretty sure. No?
I think it was only the questions.
I remember the questions. Yeah.
Oh, right, because it wasn't like something plus, like being you each had like a specific like 5 boxes they had to tick off, and then once those 5 were done, you would erase it and redo the 5. So it was a smaller amount that you would need to gain each time. So it was just questions. It's true.
Yeah, everyone had like 4 questions or something that were specific to them, but there was also group questions. And so basically, I think people were getting 3 or 4 experience per session, which meant that after the 20 sessions were kind of up, you were all like pretty high leveled at that point, like you were almost maxed. Which I think is fun. Like, and I planned for that story to be like one and done. Like this is the set amount. What I would want for our home system though is more than that. I think I would want it to be the journey as your character has evolved, like statistic wise. And I think that I'm saying this and I'm like regretting it. I think I would want it maybe to be like the level up forever. Like just keep going
forever.
Why would there be a cap? Why would I care if there's a cap? I would just do it like the higher the level, the more it takes, right? It's linear. So basically, eventually, you just don't level up as often anymore. And then when you do, it's a huge thing because, like, what do you spend points on? You're already so strong. Like, it'll be like
I think that's the issue that comes to be. At a certain point, what would make another level up feel worth it, kind of thing? Like, if you only like gain like more HP. And it's like, okay, cool, I leveled up. But like, if you still get like what 5e uses with like their prestige boons and everything like that, like you gain like abilities that are only available at higher levels, then it feels worth it. You want to get to that point. But if it's just like, oh yeah, I got 5 more HP, ooh.
Well, I think we're getting so far away from attributes, but
leveling up and EXP.
I think the most fun thing to do is kind of like what you get in the Cypher system, which is like you get like level up points and then you spend them on stuff. And then basically the higher level you are, like the more points it would take to level things up. And so basically like I want someone to get to like level 100 or level 999. Fuck it, let's go all the way. They're level 999 and they've been pumping points into becoming the sword god. And now when they get into a fight, it's like they roll a like 3D100 or something, you know, like whatever it is, and they like slice through like dimensions or shit. I don't know what's gonna happen.
So okay, you just gave me an idea. I don't want to get like even further into the weeds of this, but
Yes,
like, what if every time you get an EXP, you level up? So it's like, when you're level 10, it's just because you have a total of 10 EXP and you can put those 10 points or wherever you want. And so your total level is just how many points you've distributed throughout your character.
That's so
and then
simple.
It's just 1-to-1 and it's so simple. And it's just anytime you do something that you learn from, and then you could take it a step further and say like, as a player, I'm only going to pick things that have to do with what I did in the session. But you don't have to do that, right? Like,
Are you spending those points on things?
maybe they could. Maybe you could hoard them and then use them to like change the course of the story or something, like in Numenera. And anyway, that's just a good idea right on the table. I do want to back it up a little bit though, if I can.
Hey, I love the idea of like devalue leveling up a little bit. Don't make it so life changing, but then basically make it so that, oh my god, it would go so
Like,
much
what would
further.
you get? You get an experience in like a level 2. Okay, I'm at level 6. I have 2 experience. But like, then like, what would that mean?
Yeah, that's why I don't want to get too into it, because there's like a whole bunch of other things that we have to consider. And so I just wanted to dial it back to consider the whole EXP leveling up thing, is that there's also the balance of it. Like, again, for some reason while scrolling through Die, I saw like one line of text where it said, I think it's your Paragon is your character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like expect your Paragon to level up every like between 1 to 3 sessions or something. So it like gives you an idea, and then the progression of that, would be however much. And then like in D&D, right, that the problem is that most people spend the time in the middle of the thing, like you brought up before, Brent, and then you rarely see the end, and then at the beginning it goes by so quickly. So it's like there's like a curve to that progression that maybe needs to be balanced out a little bit more, but then that's all math and stuff, and then that'll shape how we end up deciding like what's the best way to do it. But there's that to consider too, is the progression of play. How many sessions does each group expect to play? It's like in terms of respecting the players' times and everything.
So I know we've kind of gotten up to like leveling up and everything and EXP and all that, but like do we want to spend the last like a little bit going back to attributes and seeing, okay, what would we like kind of want to use?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of like, because we've kind of like, we did that definition for like what attributes are. Now we've talked a lot about all the different attributes from these systems. Then we got into what affects those attributes, and that's where we are right now. And like, now that we've talked about all this stuff about what affects the attributes, going back to that list of like, this is what's available. 6 is a lot, especially if we're building a system that we want to be fairly well balanced with many like different types of like abilities and skills. I think 6 is, for me, too many attributes. What do you guys think?
I feel like we'd need to like come up with like, first of all, if we are trying to use like different things, if they are too many, we would have to find attributes that would be able to encompass everything we want to use as characters in our game. Because if all we can boil it down to is 6, then it's like, okay, well, do we have a choice? Like, we want to be able to have all these affecting our roles, or can we boil it down to like 4 or 3, and that be enough to be like, okay, I'm satisfied, like all these things are core and integral to what should be affecting, and nothing else really feels like it would have as much of an impact. So like I'm fine with that, having these 4 or 3, whatever it may be, affecting roles, or like describing my character.
It's really tough to say, because I love the 6, and especially because they're just, maybe it's just because they're so familiar at this point, but they feel like they encompass just about everything. But I can also see the argument for reducing it down. Like, do you really need 6? A lot of the times you'll only end up focusing really on a few of those, maybe 3 of those 6,
Bro,
and then the other
how
ones
about
are just
18 attributes?
Wait, what?
Let's go the opposite direction.
More attributes? And then they're
More
just
attributes.
skills, basically.
Yeah.
Hand.
We started talking about.
I attribute.
We were talking about leveling up. I started thinking about Skyrim, and then
Yeah, that's That's what I was thinking of too. when I
Everything's
said that.
automated, so it's very different. You don't have to calculate things when you're playing Skyrim.
Mhm.
But like skill trees and stuff like that, like as a leveling up system, is an interesting concept. But then the experience would have to reflect it as well.
That's a lot to keep track of, though.
That's a lot to keep track of.
Well, I think we, from a business standpoint, which is like not necessarily how I want to approach this, but this is a good thing to keep in mind.
Mhm.
You want level 1 to be as accessible as possible for people and for it to feel good to play. So like D&D level 1 is not that accessible. Like you still have to build out the whole character sheet, which is basically it's a character algorithm, right? And then once it is made, then when you start adding things to the algorithm, you can start to see where things change in the outcome. But D&D gets like more complicated very quickly, right? Just like many other systems. So I think in the same way that we want like leveling up to be linear in this, like that's how fast I would want it to be complicated. But at level 1, I would want people to feel competent.
Yeah.
So I think since we're still at like attributes, which is like one of the basic parts of a character, this needs to be simple because everything else will build on this, right?
Yeah.
So my inclination is towards 3. I think 3 is a really fun number. I like the way that Cypher did it, but I don't like the ones they used. So like for me, like body, skill, and mind is like perfect. You get the physical side of things, you get the mental side of things, and you get something that sits right between them. Skill is when you use your body and mind together.
So skill would be what would influence social graces and stuff?
I think it could. And I think like for me, when you have something that's multifaceted and it's able to be used in many situations, it is more fun for characters to each have a high skill, and then it's easier for the DM to call for a skill roll, but then for them to roleplay it differently. And it's like, oh, I'm super skilled, but I'm very charming, and like this is how and the other one's like, oh, I'm super skilled, I can hit an apple with an arrow from 100 meters away. The only problem is that you don't want to get into a situation where the person who's very charming with their social graces can hit the apple from 100 yards away. So that is a challenge. But
yeah, it's like the attributes that we decide on, or the number of attributes, is effectively like, where am I going with this? And it's gone. All right, like give me like 5 minutes. Somebody just talk for a second.
I think
I spoke too soon.
the number of attributes helps influence like how many classes of player there are, basically.
No, sorry, I forgot. No, sorry, it just came back to me. I wanted to bring up the fact that we're trying to create a system of tools, right? And so our attributes need to work one with our tools, but they have to be able to create all the fantasies that we want people to be able to create, which is essentially anything.
That's a good point.
So there needs to be enough to fit in a wide variety of different kinds of campaigns.
Which is another argument for it to be simple, though, right?
Yeah, no, I do see that, because if it has 2 meanings or multiple meanings, then you can apply it to many different things. There would just need to be something to rein in people who just want to use the blanket and be good at all of those things, and find a way so that it narrows that down to each character.
Is that
I wouldn't
skills?
mind having less. Oh, I don't know what those specific would be, but
No, like is the answer to that like 3 main attributes and then having skills, that if you're trying specifically to use your skill attribute to hit an apple, then you're referring to a specific section that you can't also apply to a charisma.
I think the argument is for skills to be stronger modifiers.
So yeah.
I'm just coming up with this out of my ass right now, but I think this is like the logical next step, is like if you have simple attributes to simplify the basis of what a character is on a numerical level. Skills provide all of the flavor and then therefore the mechanical differences between those characters. There's other components of TTRPGs though, so like there's skills and abilities, but often abilities are paired with classes. So like we were getting so far away from attributes in that direction. Now
Like,
I'm seeing how it's all tied together now.
Yeah. No, there's a lot.
And then
It's
you
like
have to try and
everything
balance
influences
everything so that everything works together. And
Like you're trying to make a decision here, but you're like, oh right, but I have to rubberneck look over there.
Yeah.
Cypher does it open-ended, right? For skills?
It's
Like you
too
write a
open-ended.
word.
anything
Yeah,
more,
that's what I was gonna
Big
say.
negative on Cypher. I was like, you
It's
fucked
too
up
much.
there.
It's cool to have like this many options, but this many options is
Yeah.
stupid.
I like. What about the Star Wars one? I guess this is technically D&D 3rd edition, 3.5,
yeah.
right?
Wars
Yeah.
5th edition?
Where
But then there's also 5e. We played both.
it's like there's a lot of skills, or there's like more, maybe a little bit more than
There are
what
more
D&D
because
has.
there's like D&D plus Star Wars, like
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah, but then they also have like there's certain skills that will have subsets. So it's like knowledge. You would, if you have a specific kind of knowledge, you would write down that specific kind, and you wouldn't just have, blanket bonus to any knowledge check. It would have to be something specific.
Yeah, like Arcana being like all of magic, but it'd be like Arcana, okay, but in specifically this school of magic, for example.
Yeah. So
Peter, I think you might agree, hopefully.
Hmm.
But like, I think good design can solve some problems that like complex systems like this create. Like, if you just have like a long list of text, then it's a lot. But if design-wise, if you make it in a way where it's simple to read, of like these are connected and they exist in this space, then it boils it down to like I'm only looking at this rather than like I'm looking through a list that is like the entire length of the page.
yeah.
It makes it easier, but it is still a lot of options.
I think it depends on how big that list is, because like I don't know, D&D for instance, it's just a big example guy. They do it two different ways, right? They either just have the list of skills, or they divide the skills based on the attribute that skill comes from. But I don't necessarily like the one where they divide it up. It's just because all that information should technically be in one place. Like when you look for your skills, it should be all together. You shouldn't be thinking like, I want to do a strength thing. What are my strength things, Especially for certain arguments that say like you don't need a specific attribute for certain types of skills. Like I want to intimidate someone with my strength, not my charisma, things like that. But that's very specific to D&D.
Yeah.
But maybe it could just be a list. See, like, because that's the thing with Numenera, right? It was that everyone had their own little list. You could do anything, you just wouldn't get any like bonuses to it or whatever. But then if you had the specific ones, you would get the bonuses. But then there was like times where it's like my character had, I think it was like mycology or something. And it's like, I mean, that came up a couple times, but it's not like the most useful. Whereas somebody else had the force, and like they could just do whatever the heck they wanted with that one skill.
Looking at you, Bird, again.
So it being too open-ended is a problem for sure. I don't know. Maybe it's like a big list, and then you pick from the list, but then you have to read through it in the book, and then that's more difficult for new players. And,
Sorry, I'm on the Star Wars 5th edition site right now, and I'm trying to find where are skills. And this is nowhere. It's not written anywhere, but when you look in class,
the character sheet,
they're there. They're in the sheet. They're here. There's it tells you what skills you can choose from for a class.
But it's because what Star Wars 5e does is that it specifically says that it takes a lot from D&D 5e, and the website itself shows you the differences that are Star Wars, but everything else comes from 5e. So saying like, here's the guide that makes it Star Wars, but everything else that isn't here is you follow the D&D player handbook. So it refers to the player handbook a lot.
Section 7 of the PHB under skills. It lists it out in a very weird way, in my opinion. Kind of like you could just scroll past it and miss it.
Oh yeah.
Section 7. What is that? Using ability.
Using
score?
ability scores. If you
Oh my
keep
God.
scrolling,
Here?
scrolling, you get to skills, and then it says athletics, acrobatics, blah
There
blah
we
blah,
go,
blah,
yeah.
blah, 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 blah. But like, for such a main part of a character, it's almost like an afterthought. Like,
Well, I just went to
let
the
me
sheet,
list
right?
these.
And part of the reason I was here is that I wanted to see what was different from regular D&D, and basically it's
Mhm.
there's technology and piloting.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like literally the only difference in skills. I like having a huge list of skills for people to choose from. That's what Savage Worlds has too. That's what Pathfinder has as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that like this is thinking about the character sheet, so this is even further from the discussion. But I think it's good to just have a space for people to put the skills that they're going to use the most often. But then someplace else, you have the full extent of what these skills actually are. And so you're not really focused on it. You could always do the things that you're not really good at, but then the DM will fill in whatever you're not sure of. And for new players too, like having a bunch of skills on your D&D sheet, and like some of them are like, most of them are just zeros if you're not playing like a bard or something, it's like, do they really need to be on there?
Well, for the
It's not a
negatives,
bad
they do,
idea.
right?
The negatives for sure. That's another thing. It's like, do we want negatives?
I think that
Well-
makes sense though.
It does. I think it lets you play more types of characters, especially if you want to like challenge yourself. You can make like really
Yeah.
bad characters in D&D.
Because
One of
in
the
your
things-
definition, Brent, it said strength and weaknesses.
And weaknesses.
And when you said that, I was like, when do we ever really even think of it in terms of weaknesses?
So they should
But it's true.
definitely-
D&D, it's only your negative modifiers, right? It's whatever dump stat you had. One of the big things in Savage Worlds, I think they do this in Pathfinder too. I'm not sure. I'm not as familiar with it. But basically, when you create your character, you can take like really cool abilities and stuff. But to offset those, you also have to take hindrances. And so basically, it's like sometimes there's a really sick ability, like you're incredibly strong. But then you have to take a level 2 hindrance. And then the level 2 hindrances are listed out. And like one of them is like you're blind. Like they're bad. They're really bad. And they force you to play your character in specific ways. So I'm all for having a cool, like, skills or something that you are skilled in and they provide bonuses. But I'm also for having like a part of a character creation process that includes the kind of like, if you want to take more skills, then you have to take some hindrances or something like that.
I like that trade-off system.
Yeah, and basically, going back to anime, it's Hunter x Hunter, baby. If you want to be Kurapika, you want to fucking 100% destroy the Spider Clan every time, then you have to be useless at anything else than destroying the Spider Clan. But what a sick character choice, right? Like, this guy can't lose versus those dudes.
Yeah.
Or Gone, when he... spoiler alert for people who haven't seen Hunter x Hunter, read the manga. It's fucking old at this point, so I'm gonna say it anyways. When he sacrifices all of his future potential to be strong in one moment.
Shit, I would do
So
that.
for one battle, he was the most powerful being like on the planet.
Whoa, shit.
That basically like is going to die immediately afterwards, and then is saved by it, or something happens and shit goes down. But
That makes me think of the luck points in Monster of the Week.
Oh,
Like,
and
if you used up all
like
your
go-
luck points, you become doomed.
that was such a cool thing we never got to see.
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
no one wants to be doomed.
So I definitely love that. And just quickly, because I know it's already 9:50, talking about the anime thing, we played a One Piece campaign many years ago. It was like a derivative of 3.5 edition. And in the character creation, there were detriments that you could pick for your character. And so you would have like things that your character is good at, and then you'd have things that your character was kind of poopy at. And there was like wild things. Like one of them could just be like, I don't know, like hypoglycemic or something, or like you get seasick all the time, which would be terrible. But you know, just like little things like that. Yeah, you couldn't talk to women. Somebody always got lost. Somebody had a gambling addiction. Like it was just like little character flaws, you know, that you would have to role play, or the DM could call upon and be like, "Oh, these people gambling in the corner over there. I think you should go check it out." So, yes to weaknesses and detriments.
Yeah.
I think.
But those
And I
seem
think-
like those are like they don't affect abilities numerically. They affect them more in role play aspects, like how
Yeah.
you play the character, more than mathematically, I guess.
Yeah, we homebrewed rules, I think, or like, you know, they were kind of like features where they had like a little blurb of text. I remember typing it out. But I think in the rule book, it was literally just words. So it was just to give you guidance on how to role play those things.
I think we should have more mechanic rules surrounding those things.
Mhm.
I would like things to be as outlined in the system as possible, to fit in a simple manner so that it flows. I just want the story and the role play to flow really well, and for there to be as little rules hiccups as possible.
Mhm.
So it's great when things are outlined, or at the very least, if we give templates for all of the things that we have in mind, so we can homebrew them kind of efficiently.
Yeah.
Like I want someone to be able to come up with a ruling on the spot and for it to feel good.
For sure. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So, then,
So how do we feel
for the
now?
next meeting, do you guys want to try and like make up our own attributes?
I would say let's keep moving on.
Going down
Just going down the
yeah.
list, yeah.
Yeah,
So we're seeing how
think
everything
that
is.
Let's move away from attributes, actually.
basically, like I think that we're gonna have to touch each of the pieces of like almost like character creation, basically, but like
Mhm.
mechanics, like mechanical parts of the system. And then once we have an idea about each of them, then we have to like restart at the beginning and start trying to link them up.
All right.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like versioning, right? Like I think everything we talked about today, it seems like such a good idea. Then we're gonna like maybe do something else and be like, no,
Yeah, sleep on it and see. And
none of
we
it
talk
works.
about other
Never mind.
things.
We need 18 attributes.
Yeah.
And like eventually we're gonna need plenty of playtesting, because we talk about it, it all sounds great, and then we actually sit down to play it and it all falls
And it's
apart.
completely. Yeah.
And none of
Wait
it
till
actually
Tuesday,
works.
Thursday, baby.
Yeah, people are just like, I'm so confused. Like, what's this edge? And then there's I have to spend effort.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to sleep on the thing that Brent said of like small attribute bonuses and the big skill bonuses, because potentially that like solves a lot of problems. You can kind of always roll with the attribute and it's only giving you a little bit. It's not nothing, but it's not like adding a +10 where you feel like you shouldn't be allowed to. Those are reserved for the specific attributes. The big ones, you can always have a conversation. Yeah, okay, fine. You can add +2 instead of +1. But the big ones will be specific. I want to think about that more because I like it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Any last thoughts, comments you want to give before we sign off?
I think I'm good.
Looking forward to talking more about this.
Yeah.
I think last thing before we go is the next step. So the next system building session, we want to talk about skills and abilities. Is that the idea?
We could move away from, like, do we want to continue down the thread or do we want to like hop over somewhere else? I guess is the question. Because skills
talk
will be
about
directly tied to attributes.
storytelling mechanics. We could talk about combat potentially, and like how we feel about different combat systems, how we feel about what we want combat to be.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I like that.
Yeah, so well, a focus on combat, but the idea is to find a way to merge as closely as possible the role play and the combat.
Combat role play.
Well, that's what I want.
Yeah.
You guys don't want that.
Well, no, I
No,
think
I
we
do.
all want that.
We all want
Uh,
that.
I
for
like
sure.
because I don't think that means that the combat aspect isn't as detailed as it is, let's say, in like war games and stuff. It just means that the philosophy behind how the combat works is just more similar to the general TTRPG role play goodness. Does that make sense? Yeah. But again, this is like we say things and then we might back out of those real quick.
Yeah.
But it's good to consider.
So let's let all this stew in our brains, and we'll
We'll
let
make some room.
everyone know when we'll have another session like this, another system building session. We'll have a meeting and we'll get together in the near future. I don't know necessarily if we have an idea if that'll be soon or not,
Potentially.
because potentially Thursday.
Mhm.
Potentially. Would you guys
Oh.
want to do that Thursday if we
'Cause
don't do
she'd be
Chittering
in,
Woods?
Well, we would either need something to do for Thursday if Chittering Woods doesn't have.
Mhm.
If we're talking combat, I think we can talk at length
can do
about.
But
combat
Brent
philosophy.
wouldn't be there, right?
I
Ah.
probably.
Never mind.
Yeah, so it would have to be reserved for when we're all here.
me just
And it would be
double-check
great to have the others too also.
Yeah. Oh, true. Because we're always gonna miss Bernier on Tuesdays.
So TBD.
Yeah.
We'll figure that out. And we'll let everybody know. So I think I'm just gonna do the sign off. We're the Hexagon TTRPG, and you can find us on all the socials: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, otherwise known as. I'm not gonna say it. He's doing it. Yeah. And of course, your mama's house. You can find us at your mama's house. Doing your mom. Okay, and that's it. We're the Hexagon. We're
Add a little
Hexagon.
spice
See you
to it.
Thursday, maybe for the Chittering Woods. Maybe not. We'll keep you posted. Join our Discord if you haven't already. We love ya. We love ya. And I'm trying to figure out how to do the thing. I can't talk. I can't multitask.
Transition.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. 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 Bye.